Hey, Alisha.
Hey Donna.
How are you?
Take two. This is awesome.
Take two. We just had some technical difficulties, and I was like, all this energy coming in, stuffing up our internet, and lo and behold, I hadn't hooked up to the right Wi-Fi. Yep. So let's have a chat. I'm so excited that you said yes when I invited you to do a little bit of a jam out session around twin twin souls. Version is divine partnership, twin flames. Do you want to talk a little bit about? We can talk today a little bit about our differences and our own experiences, and also how amazing it is that everyone's experiences can be so diverse.
Yeah, I think that's the part that I love about it is being open to seeing unveiling more and more understanding as we go along and not limiting it to that, no, it's only this way, and if it's not this way then it's not it, because I think that's where a lot of confusion in the so-called community lies. So it's thank you so much for connecting with me, because it's so nice to have these very open conversations. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love it because the more that we can do that, the more we can share, the more we can learn, right? And, I know that I've already learned so much from you, and it's just amazing when we can collaborate in that way that it just opens up and broadens our horizons.
yeah, absolutely.
Minds open up to possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe we should just do a brief intro of how we know each other, because I think that's really cool.
Yes, we should do that. So, well, we have known each other for a long time, haven't we?
Yeah. So we basically were almost what you would call neighbours, except we had national bushland between our houses growing up.
Yeah, one street away from each other if you cut through the forest.
Yeah.
On the same side of the hill, yes. And then we also went to the same school.
Yeah.
And then we also sat in the same psychic development class together many moons ago, 2002.
Yeah. And then,
yeah.
I was going to say, and here we are today, and it's it's just kind of magical how things happen like that. Yeah,
absolutely. How we come full circle, and how that connection was always already there, and now we get to play that more, which is really cool. And I was sharing with you before we jumped onto this, when we were talking earlier about how when I met you, when you back in 2002, you were always about finding a soulmate. That's all you talked about. Really, almost all you talked about. It was all about is this boyfriend my soulmate? And then no, they're not. And I need to find my soulmate. And I'm going to go off traveling the world to find my soulmate. And it was just all about the soulmate. And now look at you. Of course.
I know, and I cringe and I laugh all at the same time because it's so true. And I so often say to a lot of my clients, or if I'm sharing my personal story, and I will make a joke about myself in the sense that it was always my mission, and I was literally obsessed with it for as long as I can remember. And now it makes sense why, because it was such a big part of my calling, my mission, my work. And it's so nice to have someone that can validate that, because I often say, it was so much a big focus of mine that I actually traveled the world to find that person, because it was so important.
And that's what I knew right before you travel.
Yeah.
Amazing. You really were obsessed with it. And look, you needed to be. That was your soul path. That was such an important part of you and what you're about to discover over the years to come.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine you'd be where you are right now?
What was that?
Did you ever have imagined that you'd be where you are right now?
No, not at all. And as we were saying earlier, kind of joking, like, if I had known what I know now, because, you know, so many people, as I did, had this kind of perfect relationship ideal in my mind that life was going to be magical, which, yes, it is. But to get to that point, you know, what absolutely, I don't have words for the journey that it took me on, and how much I had to go through, and still, you know, to this day. But it was like, if I had known that, I would have literally run the other way.
What do you think we were doing when we signed those soul contracts before we came in? Like, what were we agreeing to? Because in the conscious, in the physical world, like, we would never say yes to these experiences or these things. And we're joking about it, you know, lightheartedly, but the challenges that we all go through, you know, I often say our biggest challenges are also our greatest gifts. It's what we, like, hardship, if you like, I don't really like using that word, but that we go through, and that it forms us, and it forms who we are in a way that, you know, that's what our wisdom is to share with the world as well. And so that's why, you know, our challenges do become our greatest gifts, do become our greatest blessings, because, you know, and it's laughable when you're on the other side of it, but while you're in the middle of it, it's like, fuck. Right?
The actual fuck, and no, this is not okay.
Yes. And who said that we were doing this anyway, you know? So, tell us, Alisha, like, what is your experience, and, you know, what has been...
Yeah, I guess the work that I do, which is based off my own experience, is working with what I probably prefer to term twin soul, but interchangeably divine counterpart, twin flame, is the work that I do. And so in one school of thought, it is the same soul that fractals. So when it incarnates into Earth, it becomes in two different bodies, the male and the female counterparts. So it is majority of the work that I do is around the romantic, soul defining, you know, partnership, because there's a great deal of sacred sexuality that is connected to that, and it's I mean, there's so much to it, but ultimately I say, you know, your counterpart is your ascension partner that really triggers the awakening that puts you through immense growth, soul growth, at a very, very rapid rate.
You know, I hear what you just said, Alisha, around, like, sacred sexuality, you know, being a part of that process. And, you know, do you think that every, let's say, twin soul couple in that romantic partnership, you know, concept, has had to nail the experience of sacred sensuality and lovemaking in a way that, you know, activates the energy through the kundalini and all of that? That's a pretty cool question to ask you straight up. Is that okay?
It's fine. I forgot what the question. Does it have to, or
does it need to be that the two people in the divine partnership, that they experience it through sacred sensuality or sexuality, of that uniting of the energies of the kundalini rising?
Yeah, not always. I mean, there's so many different facets. That was my experience, and that was like 4 years ago. That the cat, like, was the catalyst for my kundalini awakening, and just sent me on a whole different path that I couldn't have fathomed. But you know, I see so many different cases, and I work with so many different people that in some cases they haven't even met physically yet. So they've gone through and whether that is that they haven't met in physical yet but will, or that one isn't incarnated. Like, there's so many different facets, and so a lot of the time that merging of the sexual energy, or the merging of the energies, can take place energetically as well as physically.
Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it? It's so fascinating.
Yeah. There's so much to it, but I know that your experience is different, and it takes away, it's not inclusive of that component.
Not at all.
Not at all. So we want to make that really clear. But I love how there are similarities, and there is this kind of thread that connects it all in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Shall I talk a little bit about
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think hand the ball over to you.
Yeah. As I was saying to you before, like, this is not something that I've studied or researched. It's just been like based on my own experience, and then having people that I work with having similar experiences and starting to piece the pieces of the puzzle together. So when I was, younger, before I even met my husband, I always knew that there was a little girl soul around me. I always knew it. And in fact, when I fell pregnant the first time, I thought it was a girl at the beginning. And then through the pregnancy, I realized it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so then my firstborn was a beautiful boy. And it took me a bit through the pregnancy to adjust to the fact that actually this baby soul that I'd always felt around me as that little girl wasn't coming through. And then after I had my son, a couple of years later, like, I was like, okay, a few years later, I was like, okay, I think finally I'm ready to have another baby. Like, let's give it a go. And I conceived, and I could feel the soul of this little girl. And I could feel that I was pregnant with her, and then miscarried. And so the miscarriage experience was, like any miscarriage, it was devastating. But for me, I had the connection with this soul that I'd felt for so many years. And it was extra devastating because I just had this yearning to be with her. And I even feel like emotional talking about it, So then it took a while, and I was able to fall pregnant again, and I got the energy of the same baby, the same soul, and that's who is now my daughter, Violet. And like, when I was pregnant with her, the first pregnancy that I miscarried, I could feel this Violet energy all around her. And I said to Spirit, like, if this pregnancy stays, like, it was at the point of which I was just starting to like bleed, if this pregnancy stays, I'll call her Violet. And it didn't. And then when she came in again, all I could see and feel was this Violet energy around me. Or like around her, like in my belly. And so her name is Violet. My son's name is Archie, and he's the turquoise energy. He's the turquoise boy. And so even before he was born, before I even knew that he was a boy, like, I knew intuitively, but I'd painted his room in turquoise and all the stuff. Anyway, this is going to turn into a bit of a long story, Alisha.
Needs to be. It's so nice to listen to.
But while I was pregnant with Violet, I went through a lot. Emotionally, I was, at some point, like when I conceived her, I was in a really good space within myself. It had taken me a while to get to that place. And then during the pregnancy, challenges happened in my external world, and there was all sorts of inner turmoil that I went through. But all the while, I could feel this sense of joy. And I really feel like, actually, that's like, if you meet Violet, she's such a joyful being. She's just so happy all the time, and she lights up the world around her. Like, it was just this amazing experience to, carry her in my belly. And then also to have that feeling of yearning. Like, there's a yearning that mothers or mothers to be have for these children. And that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't had the experience of that yearning.
Mhm.
But there's the next level yearning, which is the yearning to be with this particular soul, or to have this particular soul come in. I feel like I'm going to cry, Alisha. It's like nothing else. This yearning to be with this soul that is, it's almost like you're not complete without being with them. And I've never subscribed to that theory, mind you, of that someone else needs to make you complete. So even for me to say that, you know, express that feels like, like, Donna, like, no. But it really does feel like that when it's this particular soul connection. Like the yearning for them to be earthside, the yearning for them to be in the physical together. And so when Violet was born, I must have had, like, of course, the amazing flood of oxytocin and all the rest of it, right? Like, I was high on life, obviously. But when she was born and I first held her, I was just like, oh my God, I'm complete. Like, and we are complete. Like, I knew the family of 4, we were complete. But I could just feel that there was this sense of completion for me, like to have that soul connection and to be together is just like nothing else, you know. And I love my son, like I love him so much, but it's just a different experience. And from that, I realized that for me, I think my daughter is that twin soul. And it's obviously not a sexual, you know, there's no sensuality, no sexuality, of course there's not. She's my daughter, you know. But what happened when she came in was that she was probably a few months old, I don't know, 4 or 5 months old, and I'd always done my healing work as like a hobby on the side, and, you know, like it's something that I always dreamed about doing it full time, or like as my only source of income, let's say. And then when Violet was born and I was sitting there, and I'll never forget, I was sitting there in the rocking chair breastfeeding her, and I had this huge download come in of what I was to do. And it felt like this opportunity of it's now or never. And I need to step in and step up and be all that I can be for these beautiful kids that, you know, have chosen to come in through me and my husband. And I can't just say to them, like, you can do whatever you want, guys. Like, whatever you want, you can do and be in the world. Like, that was not going to cut it with these kids, you know, particularly Violet. She needed to see that you can live your dreams. And I needed to create something that I hadn't created yet to allow a pathway for her, is what it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that, and when she was born, it felt like she was really calling me forth into all that I could possibly be. And so there was this activation process that happened just by us being together, of I was getting called in to start to fulfill my soul potential that I hadn't yet expressed. And I knew that I wasn't expressing it, and it felt shit, but I just hadn't got to that point yet. Mm-hmm. Coming together of our souls, that reuniting, to me was like an activation, because it helped me step into my soul potential again. And then that yearning, as I said, for us to be together, and just everything to feel so good and complete when we are, like now that we are earthside together. And then what I realized was, like, as I've been doing more and more of my healing work, you know, over the years, but like more recent years, so like Violet's about to turn 4 in a couple of months, is that I've had other women come to me who have that same yearning, who have that same, like, yearning to be with these souls. They can feel it, they know it, like they just have, it's heartbreaking for them to even tap into the fact that they want to have this baby, because they're heartbroken that they're not with them. And it's so full on. It is such a full on experience of these women allowing their hearts to open up enough to say that, yes, I want this, but at the same time that it's so heartbreaking not to be together. And that journey that, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
That journey that we go through of, choosing to be together, but the challenges that each of these women have gone through in the way that I've seen are like so fucking full on, and they're not my story to tell, but they're stories of miscarriages, they're stories of pregnancies that have been birthed, like, you know, we call a miscarriage what, like with the first 12 to 14 weeks, you know, souls that have gone further through the pregnancy, have been born, you know, at full term and then haven't lived, you know, the incredible stories and the heartbreak that people go through in the processes of trying to bring these babies in. It's like, it often is not smooth, and it's filled with turmoil and challenge, and like really puts people through their paces. And then on the other side, when these souls are born, what I'm seeing in the mothers is that it just has this incredible activation, particularly around what I call soul work, you know, whatever they're here for. It just feels, are you okay, honey?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, you're hitting on some such important points. Continue, please continue.
And then it just feels like, like what I'm witnessing in the women who are able to bring these babies in is that they just light up, like they're illuminated, and then they just start doing what they're meant to be fucking doing, you know, that they've known for all of these years of what they're meant to be doing, and then they actually start doing it, just like I did. It was like the soul coming earthside is like this impetus or awakening for particularly the mother to just fucking do the shit that we're here to do, you know? Yeah.
Wow. I've never heard you talk about it in such depth, and so it's really hitting so many points that I can relate to in kind of similar but different ways. And thank you. I just want to thank you for sharing that, and I think that will resonate with so many people, because as we've spoken about, our work is somewhat very interlinked in the sense that my work is working with twin souls as in a couple that are bringing through children, and I see the so much similarity in terms of the depths that need to go through to be able to bring these highly evolved children into physical. I know this is.
I love this conversation.
And it's seeing what I've seen and experienced, and it's interesting because you just mentioned that your daughter's going to turn 4 in a couple of months, and 4 years coming up in a couple of months is such a pivotal time in my own, and I'd love to know if it was around the same time that she came into the world that I went through a massive activation. It's uncanny how interlinked everything is, you know.
We'll talk about that offline, perhaps. Nothing like soul tribe doing it together, Alisha.
Yeah, I know, right? It's really utterly profound. Just when you take in the enormity of like these souls that are coming through, you know, and what we're doing and what we have to go through in preparation to be able to birth them and to bring them through is utterly profound when you think about what their soul work and their mission and contribution to the planet is. Just
because it's not actually about us. It's not even like it's this lifetime isn't even, it's not about me, and it's not about my work. It's not about, like, what it's about is paving a pathway so they can fully go into theirs, whatever that amazing magic is going to be. And I hope this recording gets listened to like in 50 years time or something, because I don't know what that is, but I just know it's something so much bigger than we could even comprehend.
Yeah.
And all my job is to do is to pave a pathway for that opening, to create a solid foundation for that opening, whatever that is, through our children.
Yeah. Wow. It really, it's just, I don't know what the words are, but I want to go back to one thing that you were talking about, and the similarities is because from my perspective, you know, the twin soul dynamic that I deal with literally is that catalyst, that activation that set, like, you know, that sends you into like your soul work inevitably. And it's, you know, what I see with twin souls is that their soul work is a joint mission, probably not straight away, but there is this joint mission, and generally one gets activated and gets into gear first, and then the other will join when the time is right. In my case, like my work, my personal experience has been, first of all, like finding that person, which was a mission in itself. It took a decade. And then
how many countries?
I think I had traveled the globe twice before I landed in Brazil. So, and then, you know, through that, and it wasn't revealed to me until 2015 with clarity that the person that I had met like 6 years prior was actually the person that I'd been seeking. It was such an elusive journey and process, and I can see why it wasn't revealed earlier, because there was still other things that I had to complete. And if I had known that information, because I was so mission focused, I would just like straight to that, you know.
And you would have missed all the winding path of all the shit and all the challenges that you had to go through that prepared you for that moment of meeting, right? Or knowing, even perhaps. It's like you can't avoid the winding road. Like that's the deal. That's the preparation. That's exactly what we need to go through, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. So it was at that point when that awareness came through. There was two parts to it. It was like I had solved the mystery, and I was so pissed. I was like, I'm psychic. I should know this. How on earth was it like in front of my face for so long and I didn't? I mean, it had crossed my mind. Don't get me wrong. It had crossed my mind, but it wasn't, you know, the neon lights.
Yeah. Soulmate. Your heart like neon lights. Soulmate.
And I think one important point that I think it's really important to bring up is that I have a concept that we come into very similar frequency people on that journey. And I think that's where it can be so confusing for a lot of people. And then people say, oh, I've, you know, met my fifth twin flame and you know, all that sort of stuff that does get thrown around. Because when I look back, I see how there were very significant people that had come into my life over the course of like a decade or more, that and some of them were kind of romantic, and some of them weren't. Some were just, you know, influential people in my life who activated me. And so I saw it as this kind of stepping stone or spiral that I had to kind of, whether it was to close off karmic ties or it was to go through activations, I had to do that level of preparation before I could even, you know, physically meet with my counterpart.
Yeah. That's really, really awesome point. You know, there are, I think the word soulmate has got a lot to answer for in some regards because, you know, like, sometimes there can be that, you know, pre my husband, of course, let's say, not let's say, like pre my husband, you know, having relationships with men where there was a very, very strong chemistry and like soul knowing, soul connection, and yet they weren't that person. But at the time, I thought maybe they were because this chemistry and this electrical energy between us, it just was like magnetizing. Felt like maybe that was my you know, V1.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about. I'm not sure about it. Like I know that that's not the case, but that's also a really interesting dynamic, isn't it? So
yeah.
Like part of preparation and preparation of what you need as you go through. And
I have a theory, and obviously this is just a theory, and I often joke about it. It's like when you have that, you know, that like really explosive pull and that chemistry, and it's like intense. I always kind of go in with caution because I'm like, oh, you know, and I see it as like this like really intense like magnetic pull and this like explosiveness because it has to get in really quickly to iron some stuff out. And work out whatever it needs to do on a soul level. So it's like it's created, like that situation is created because you cannot you can't pull away from it because it's so enticing.
Wow. But, you know, I wonder why some people are having affairs, you know, in marriage and so forth, or in relationships. Like, you know, it's, yeah.
And one thing like I've often thought about is because I know with a lot of this, what I call the significant people who played a role in my life, being that like you and I both started psychic development at quite a relatively young age, like we were like in there, like, you know, let's get going kind of thing. And so we were trained and we had this kind of you know, abilities, for lack of a better word. And so when I would meet, I was very aware of the past life connection that I had with them. And I think that you would be the same. It's like sometimes you can just look at them and you get flashes or whatever. And I often think to myself about people who don't have that awareness of a soul recognition, how confusing that must be when you feel this instant pull and draw to someone that you can't explain.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like male and female.
Yeah.
Because then the mind gets confused going, why am I feeling this pull to this person? I should be romantic with them, when it's not always the case.
Yep. Yep. So true. So true. Yeah. Yeah, it must be confusing as hell, hey?
These are my 3 a.m. ponderings, you know. It's good to have.
You want to talk a little bit more about your experience, Alisha, with your divine counterpart, and you know what's opened up for you? And
yeah, sure. So I traveled the world, you know, that went on for a number of years. I was guided through messages that I was given in dream state, and I kind of followed them. I was like, I can imagine to the average person, I must have seemed incredibly crazy, because I would just like, all right, I've got to go to Brazil. I'd wake up and have a dream. Okay, I've got to move to Brazil, you know. And so I met him. I met him 11 years ago. 10 years ago. 11. Anyway, and we stayed connected. I met him when I was living in Brazil, We stayed connected, and then it wasn't until 2015 when I had the realization. So we'd kind of been in and out of contact over a certain period of time. But I think one thing that I never speak about is that, can't believe I'm going to say this, I think what really confused me was that while we weren't even in contact, I would have a lot of dreams about him in very specific details, almost nightly. And that was very conflicting for me because at the time I was in another relationship, I was living with someone, and I would be waking up at 5 a.m. in periods almost every morning, with having a dream about something about him or his family or his business, like to really precise detail.
Wow.
And I kind of look back now, and to me it makes sense because I understand so much more. But like to go through that and to go through that alone, and and not be able to talk to anyone about that.
Oh, honey.
I think it brings up a lot of like society and judgment, because you kind of go, you know, I'm living this life and I'm, you know, at that time I'm quite happy, and I'm being bombarded with something that I don't understand. And so I went through that, and I don't think I really spoke to anyone about it because I knew that I couldn't, because people will go, but you're in a relationship or you're happy, you know, like, you know, that's the wrong thing to do. You can't, you know. So I think that's where there's so much gray area when it comes to these connections, because they defy, and they're like that in design to defy, you know, the status quo and what I call the 3D relationship template. And so it's really common for a lot of people to meet their counterpart while they're still married, or while they're in a, you know, it always comes in what seems to be the most, you know, less opportune time, or you know, so you know that's something that I don't often share, and so that kind of led into me going back. Just to explore. Well, actually, I'll say that from my mind, I went back after not seeing him for 4 years. I went back to see him because I felt like I needed closure. That is what I had kind of justified. I need closure, so I'm going to go all the way to the other side of the world.
You and be with the pet or whatever.
I laugh now, but it was like I needed closure, so I literally, like, spur of the moment, booked a trip to Brazil. I didn't even tell my partner. I look back now, I'm like, damn. Because I wanted to go back because I felt that my life wasn't moving forward because I hadn't closed off with him.
And you can understand that would be a logical explanation, you know?
Yeah. And in my world, it really was, because, and look, bless my partner at the time, me and him no longer have any contact, and I think he's having a really happy life, and I wish him all, you know, the best. But he picked up on what I wasn't even prepared to admit to myself, and you know what, because I was always quite open with the people that were in my life. I never kept any. It's just who I am. And one night he put me off on it, and he said, "You're still in love with him." He said, "And you should." He goes, "I don't want to stand in the way. You should go and do what you need to do." And I was so confronted.
Goosebumps.
Yeah, I was so confronted by that, and in such denial, even to myself, because I was like, no, we're just friends, and you know.
No, you don't understand. No.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I went back, and of course it did quite the opposite thing. It didn't close. I didn't get any closure. It reignited something that was even more confusing. So, cut long story short, yeah. So we reconnected, but like the level of like heightened, like multi-dimensional goings on in these connections just blows your mind. Like the telepathy, the dreams, just feeling and experiencing their experience you know, is utterly profound. So
Wow.
so then it was a couple of years ago that after we kind of reconnected, after I had a Kundalini awakening, I started having very intense experiences. It heightened my experience, where I started having what I call conscious contact with star beings, galactic beings. So that all accelerated, and then I started.
Me too, post having my daughter. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And then I started having very intense, vivid dreams about these children who wanted to, which I knew that meant that these children wanted to come through. And at the time, I couldn't even rationalize how that was going to happen, just considering the circumstances that we both lived on opposite sides of the world. And, I couldn't, I wasn't going to eliminate anything, but it didn't, for so many reasons, it wasn't the right time. Let's just put it out there. Yeah, it didn't make sense at all. So in the beginning of 2016, I went through what I call an interdimensional conception, where I conceived, or another term is like light conception, probably more commonly known as like a virgin birth type. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Yeah, that's the one.
Conception?
That's the one. I'm like, immaculate conception, yeah. And that just took my journey on a whole different experience of things that I had to learn and discover and uncover as I went, and realize that everything I thought I believed to be true, you just throw it all out or you turn it on its head. And understand that, that really anything is possible. So I spent a really long time, a very, very dark night of the soul,
Yes.
researching to try to understand what I was experiencing, and if there, it was very isolating. I felt very alone, and it felt like such a heavy burden to be going through this experience, in the sense of like what it meant for where humanity was at.
Yes.
That this was actually possible and happening. And of course my conscious, like my my lower mind, my rational mind, wanted to fight me the whole way, but I couldn't fight what my body and everything else was and so it's been a really really heartbreaking journey. It's been incredibly transformative, but it was through this process that kickstarted me on my work and well on my way, and also through this starting to connect with other women, and quite a lot of other women also going through a very similar experience.
Yes.
So yeah, I look back I look back at my life now, and to a couple of years, and I just, it baffles me, because I could never, as good of a psychic as what I used to think that I was.
I know, right?
Nothing. Yeah, right.
Now I know that I know nothing.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's kind of the very, very short version.
Very short version. Alisha, I just want to acknowledge you for sharing so openly and vulnerably around those things, particularly the experiences of going through things alone. And I don't know what it took for you to get through that, but I'm so glad that you did. I also know that it's a big part of your why as to why you do your work, right? so people don't have to go through it by themselves like you did, so people can understand that actually, I want to say it's normal. Like maybe it's not common, but it is part of normal. It's not common and it's not commonly known or talked about, but everything that you've gone through is normal. You're not fucking crazy, and neither of all these other people out there going through the same thing. We're not crazy. We don't need to be sent to the fucking asylum. What we do need is a community of people who understand and who can provide that space of acceptance and listening.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just want to thank you for sharing in that way, because what you do is so profound and amazing that, you know, I know that I reached out to you recently about an experience that I had. I was like, I don't know who else to contact, but you. And I knew that I would be greeted with, like, acceptance, you know, and you really did hold that space for me too when I had this awakening recently. And so, you know, whatever it took for you to even just share that today, thank you.
Thank you.
Bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you, Donna. You know, it means the world to me, and to be able to have this conversation with you is, you know, it's beautiful to have the platform to be able to try and share this, to normalize, or to spread the awareness, to expand the consciousness of people, you know. And it's, you know, I can talk about it now without bursting into tears, so, you know, but it hasn't been an easy road at all, and it's very much my why as to why I do everything that I do. Because, you know, a big part of going through this, what I coin a 5D pregnancy, so it's very, very different. A big part of it is that the frequency on the planet to be at a certain vibration for these children to come through. And so you know, when I finally understood that, and stopped looking at it from a linear perspective, it ignited every aspect of me that this is my mission. I have to, you know, there's so many, you know, and it's about getting people to the space and the planet, you know, and everything,
Right.
which is massive, you know. And it's so nice to know that there are people like you out there doing this amazing work, because we all have, you know, we all play a really important and crucial role in the whole. Yeah. So thank you, Donna.
That's the thing, like, this really is all about our bigger mission, our bigger purpose of enabling, through us having our own ascension process, we enable the ascension process of Gaia, of Mother Earth. And so we can start to move into exactly where it is that we're heading. And the more that we activate that frequency within ourselves, the more that we activate it with our, you know, whether it's, you know, from your perspective with the divine counterparts and the romantic relationships, or whether it's through my perspective about, you know, bringing children in who feel like that twin soul, or, you know, doesn't matter what the avenues are for each of us. All of our paths are so unique and individual, aren't they, Alisha? You know, but it's all leading to the same purpose point.
Yep, exactly.
Of really ascension for all of us and Gaia together.
Right. Beautifully said, because I always say, like, there's not one path to ascension, there's many. You know? And it doesn't matter which pathway you take, just take the damn pathway and get going.
Get your ass onto the path, like, fucking do it. Because it doesn't feel good not doing it either. That's like bloody misery. Oh,
yeah.
In that space, you know, and we know.
And yeah, one additional thing that I want to share is, like, I sat in a miserable space, you know, from my perspective, far too long, you know, in hindsight, but it was a lot to digest and a lot to go through all at once, and feeling as though I was alone doing it. And I had this really angry conversation with the universe and, you know, all my team of like, why, you know, why do I have to go through all of this?
Yes.
And I woke up in the morning and basically the answer came, and it was because this is your mission to share this information. And honestly, nothing instilled fear into me more than the thought of speaking openly and publicly about this. It was,
I can imagine.
and so I, you know, little baby steps, and I say that to the people that are watching who feel that call and may feel fear around stepping into their mission, because it was so massive that I had to take baby steps. So it started off as me writing under an anonymous blog so that other people could find me. So other women who were going through, you know, could find me. And then like bit by bit, it was only, it'll be 12 months in a couple of weeks that I like did my debut and spoke publicly at a conference.
Yeah,
so, you know,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's only been bit by bit by bit, because each step of the way, you know, you have to overcome.
Yeah, your fear.
Yeah.
And let alone all the fucking past lives where you've been persecuted and killed because of it. You know, like, you know, I don't know anyone who's on their soul path that's not coming up against their fears, and also all of these experiences either for themselves in, you know, past lives, dimensions, whatever, plus what sits in our collective, you know, in the consciousness. So, yeah, right. It is about baby steps.
Yeah, and then sometimes we do massive leaps, and then we do more.
But those leaps, they're not fucking planned. Like, you can't predict when that shit happens. It's like, whoa! Holy shit! Here we go! I was sharing with you before, Alisha, wasn't I? Like how like that happened, and I thought it would be like amazing after this like upgrade, whatever thingy thing that I had experienced, and then all of a sudden I was like, wow, like in my shit, and you know, like from possibility to the depths of darkness and back and forth and swinging wildly between them, and I was like, isn't this meant to be all sunshine and roses? I like, you just can't anticipate really what's going to happen. But you know, before you were talking about how heartbreaking your experiences have been, Alisha, and they are heartbreaking, and it's designed exactly like that, isn't it? So your heart can be, I want to say, literally torn apart. It's only through that heartbreak process that the light pours in and that your light pours out, that you start to become illuminated if you can honor what that heartbreaking process is. Whether it's grief or whatever the individual situation is, it doesn't really matter. But it's designed for that very purpose.
Yeah. It sure is, and I love the way that you say things almost like identically to how I describe things. It's really beautiful to see that resonance. But yeah, there's always the two components. Like there's the soul that relishes in the transformation, and there's the human that wants to kick and scream and you know, so there is that human element that is what do I call it? It feels like it's soul crushing, but it's soul defining. Like it's yeah, it's ego crushing. It's like
I was just thinking how like recently with that whole thing like that I've been through, like my ego just got, I just had my ass kicked by the universe. Any part of ego that was still sitting there with me that I didn't even realize was still sitting there with me. Fucking hell, I had an ass kicking, and every time I needed it, you know, on this side of it, I can see now, but at the time it felt like my truth and it felt aligned, but nope.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly all that can, you know, shift and change, and yeah.
Yeah, like I would have said, you know, a couple of months ago, I would never say that now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good.
It is. It is
Before
good.
we wrap up, hun, do you want to talk a little bit more about your 5D pregnancy? Would you like to share more about that? Because I've just, you know, I know from my perspective, it's just utterly fascinating.
Yeah.
I love hearing about it, and I'm sure that other people are curious about it too, because you said about it being a 5D pregnancy, but you also said about having your physical you said something about the physical, that you couldn't ignore your body. Do you want to share
Yes.
more about that?
Yeah. I sometimes struggle in terms of like the trying to keep it as simple as possible, but it's I see it as a path of ascension. So I talk about ascension a lot from the energetical perspective of like embodying a higher frequency, which is our higher self, ultimately, or our 5D self, or whatever you want to call it, so many terms. So I always say, so the conception took place on a higher dimension. So there was no physical contact. Yeah, I'm trying to think of although we were together physically, didn't. And it was a blissful merging that took place that was out of this world. I cannot even begin to describe it in words what that. It was just pure bliss, nirvana like state.
Wow.
I had a lot of work galactically to support me prior to that point happening, right down to having like physical scars on my body after waking up, after missing time and things like that. And I say that because it is part of the experience from my own experience, but I don't say that with, people can have very skewed perception around, contact or abduction. I don't see it as that at all. I see it as very much a benevolent team assisting this process because it's massive. So that was just my little disclaimer. But from that point, I knew that something had changed in my body. And interestingly enough, I've got a painting here that I keep staring at. I'm going to bring it up in a second. But I knew that something had happened. I had had a lot of dreams leading into it. I'd had a lot of contact with my children over many, many years. Like if I look back, I saw them. I had made contact with them probably about 13 years prior to, and sort of in and out. So it was very much a process that was in a long period of time. And even when I look back, every time I came into physical contact with my my counterpart over many, many years, I would come home and have a period of like a couple of months where I felt and thought that I was pregnant, and then it would go away. So I look back now and I'm like, wow, this wasn't just something that, but I wasn't privy to that until, obviously looking back. So after the conception took place, I went through a very radical expansion in my own consciousness, my own ascension process. And it wasn't long after that my body, I could feel this energy, like this powerful energy in my womb, and my body started morphing and changing to I want to say to reflect that. And I did go and see some medical practitioners that confirmed that I was indeed pregnant. I decided not to go down that route because I literally did not know what to expect, being how much had transpired around.
When you confirmed you were like, what do you mean? What test?
No, it didn't come up on a blood test, but an internal examination. So, and before I went to that, I had gone to my acupuncturist, who I had been going to since I was about 14. So she knew my body really well, and I didn't tell her anything, but she had checked my pulses, as they do, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, she looked at me like, no, she's like, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "Oh." Oh. And then her eyes like widened and almost popped out of her head. And she said, "But I've never seen anything like this before." And I said, what is it? And she said, "Everything in your body seems dull. Like the energy in your body seems dull in comparison to this immense light that is pulsating in your womb."
Oh my God, like, I don't know if you can see, but the light just feels like illuminated, like literally on the screen. And also when you were talking about your pregnancy earlier, I just saw all colour. It was like everything came into colour. It wasn't there before. And it's not that you're not a beautiful, powerful, gorgeous being, but as you said, I think it's just the energy of the soul. All I say is just so rainbow, like it just rainbow light, like that's what I saw, like just rainbow colors.
Yeah. It'll be interesting watching the playback to see, but it's interesting that you say that, because the first thing that came to me when I realized that something was going on, I didn't understand what, but I was doing a energy session, and all of a sudden I noticed that my ability to do energy work had gone like on supercharge mode. And I had this rainbow energy emanating from my body, which I'd never, and I didn't know what it was, and I was like, "What is this? What is going on?"
Oh my God, shivers. Wow.
Yeah. But I do want to say to you, because when you were talking about your journey and with Violet, very early on in the pregnancy for me, I had someone who came, who was a friend of a friend, who's quite clairvoyant and sees a lot of stuff. And she took one look at me and her eyes like popped out of her head, and she said, she apologized. She's like, "I'm so sorry to stare, but I've never seen that before." And I was like, "Can you explain what you mean?" She said, "Well, normally a pregnant woman will give off like a orangey yellow glow." And she said, "But your stomach is like violet purple, and it looks like it has rainbow glitter." Yeah.
Fucking hell.
And I've had a few psychics say the same thing.
I mean, Violet, she's 3 turning 4. She's obsessed with rainbows. Like, it's just, it's standard protocol. But, we're in the car this morning, Alisha, and like, because I've been teaching my kids to drop down and connect in their heart. And so Archie goes to me, "Mum, let's drop into our hearts." And I'm like, "Yeah." And so he said what was in his heart, which is almost inevitably always happy. It was so fucking funny. And then Violet goes, "And what's in my heart is rainbows and butterflies and love hearts." And I'm like, "Yes, darling, yes, of course it is," And what was in my heart was that I just felt like so happy and so excited. I'm like, really, I didn't realize how happy I was until I checked in, and maybe that's, being able to come into this space with you, Alisha. It's so fucking awesome. That blows my mind. Violet energy, and then the rainbow sparkles. The rainbow sparkles I didn't get, but I have now been experiencing rainbow colors coming in from like through that galactic cosmic kind of energy stream, which is new for me. But, wow.
I'll
Yeah, show us the picture.
Yeah, I'm not really happy with it. I don't think it's finished, but I was trying to depict the difference between what I call 3D and 5D pregnancy. So, yeah.
What's the I mean, obviously the colors, like I really get that.
I guess what I was trying to depict here is like, like a linear 9-month gestation.
Yes.
And then how this is very energetic to come into materialization. It's quite a different process. I'm going to put
But
it
I'm
down.
going to talk to you forever, Alisha. What do you feel is the two
So I,
babies?
yeah. To what I tend to find a lot in my work is women who are going through similar kind of 5D pregnancy. It's uncanny how women find me in things that I've never put out publicly. Like they have the same level of detail in their own experience, but a lot of us feel that we're carrying an too.
That is freaking me the fuck out because, oh my God, a couple of people that I'm working with at the moment are feeling that there's twins.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then also someone else who I'd worked with, she got like, while we were sitting in the teepee, which is where I am now, we were sitting in the teepee and she goes, oh, that she could feel the soul of the baby coming in. And I was like, she thought it was going to be some time down the path, like, you know, a year or two away. And I said, can you just feel into the timing of that? And then she got it, she connected and she was like, oh, it's now. And I was like, yeah, it's now. And I shit you not, she went off and conceived twins straight away, like in the next few days after that session we had. It was fucking phenomenal. And to hear you talk about the twins is blowing my mind because of these couple of beautiful clients that I'm working with at the moment who are feeling that there's a very strong possibility that they could conceive twins.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. My biggest question and query at the moment, or like maybe my curiosity, Alisha, is about the 5D transmission into, let's say, the 3D. You know, the process of, yes, for babies in particular, which is what we're talking about, but also, I guess, manifestation, isn't it? When we can connect with the things that are in 5D and then the process of that coming into 3D. What I know I really asked a question, but what would you say about that?
It's an integration. I think that's the I can give a couple of examples, but it's like, you know, everything is frequency. So we're always kind of adjusting. So instead of, it's not going out there, it's about bringing it in. Absolutely. Which is the hard work, you know. And so like I don't think I ever really understood the whole frequency 5D dimension thingy until timelines, all of that, until going through this pregnancy, because this really gives me a hands-on experience of how these things happen. But I see it as like everything holds a certain frequency. So we're integrating and bringing that into physical matter, into physical materialization. And so to be able to do that, whether that's through bringing a child through or embodiment for ourselves, anything that's not in alignment with that frequency has to exit the body, exit the environment.
Exactly. I've just had with the universe, because like all the stuff that I was sitting with in terms of ego just had to like disperse to make room for the light coming in.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be really abrupt and really painful. But ultimately it's in our highest good. I say that laughing because it's true, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it.
Well, it feels shit when you go through it, let's be honest. But it's amazing at the same time when you start to experience the light that is coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you start to have that's why, or understanding connected with the energetic experience of the light pouring in or out, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It is. It's amazing. It's massive, you know. I don't know if I can give any other example.
No,
I mean, I could give many examples, but did that answer it, do you think?
Yeah. Because I think as well, like, you know, a lot of my people that I work with are like, yeah, but Donna, like, I can see it all, I can feel it all, you know, I've been able to connect with it all, whether that's a new home or it's a pregnancy or whether it's a car, let's say, something quite materialistic. I can see it all, I can feel it all, but it hasn't dropped in yet. Like, yeah, that's just you know, it's the process that we need to go through to enable it to really, as you say, become embodied so it can be expressed in the 3D physical world.
Yeah. And I think also another valid point is, like, when you're walking the ascension pathway, which we all are to a degree, like I believe that everyone on this planet is, just at varying degrees and stages and phases and all that. But I think you hit a certain point that everyone, you know, that normally comes through, like, you know, trauma or Kundalini awakening, or, you know, so many, you know, there's what I call the ascension. You hit the ascension point, and I think at that point, anything of like an earthly desire of manifesting literally goes out the window, because it's only what the higher self and the highest path and the soul will allow to come in. So I think it's very much aligning with, like, the connection to our highest self to lead and guide us, as, you know, because then I think that negates a lot of, like, disappointment, because a lot of the time, like, our human self wants something.
It gets attached to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and that's when I find that things can really shift and change as to, like, what perhaps I wanted before is now no longer. It's now not actually really even fucking important. What's important is, you know, whatever soul says, basically. And it's different. And so from that perspective, I feel like things can very much shift and change and evolve as we shift and change and evolve, as you say, as we hit these different points. So we have these upgrades, if you like, then what we once wanted, what we once desired, is not even fucking in the realms of consciousness anymore. It's just disappeared. And there are other things that seem to be honed in on more so.
Yeah, very much. And I always say to people, like, whatever our frequency, our internal frequency is vibrating at, is what our reality reflects in that moment. But it's always changing. So
right. Yeah. Wow. It's so cool. We could talk about this for hours and hours.
Yeah, totally. Maybe we can do a couple more, or like some.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Part 2, whatever comes.
Yeah.
Well, now feels like a pretty good time to wrap it up. So, is that how you feel too?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. And
thank you
for just being so open and willing to share and express and share your beautiful wisdom. Like, I just adore you, Alisha. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Donna. It's so beautiful when you have that resonance and soul family.
Yeah. It's awesome, isn't it? All right. And so for anyone listening, how can they contact you, Alisha, if they wanted to reach out to you?
Cosmic Gateway on either Facebook or my website. They can contact me there. And I can give you those links, and you can do what we do. But yeah, Cosmic Gateway is the name that I operate under.
Perfect. Beautiful. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, my love. Beautiful to speak with you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. See you. Bye. Bye, everyone.